Hey everybody, Invisiblekatana here with my extremely late review for Star Wars Visions Volume 3. So I know that this is beyond, like, super late is an understatement. I don't even remember when the show came out. I'm pretty sure it was at some point last year. I honestly don't recall. But I always do a review for everything Star Wars. Things are just crazy. And also, once you watch something, because I actually did watch it, once you watch something, you're like, dang, I don't remember the details. But I even went back, I rewatched the whole volume, except for the last episode, because I didn't want to watch that. And I kind of regret watching the episode before the last episode, because I kind of thought that was a boring episode. But I did rewatch just about the whole volume, and I wrote a bunch of notes. So, because that was also a couple weeks ago. Life's been really crazy. Life's been real wild. So even a couple weeks ago when I was planning on doing this, had to not do it. So here we go with a bunch of notes. Also, I made a rule to myself. I cannot watch Maul Shadow Lord until I do this F review, because I was like, if I watch that show, I'm gonna forget all about this. I was like, I have to do it. Plus the show's not over, so I'm like, I'm not in too much of a rush, and it just allows me to have more of my favorite character kind of built up into one. So really doing this for myself more than anything else, because I know one person's gonna really watch this, but we're gonna do it anyway. So episode 1 of volume 3 is the first of 3 episodes, if I'm not mistaken, that are actually sequel episodes, and I thought it was good. It was the Ronin. Got my notes. Having a former Jedi that has the super speed, I thought he was an interesting character, kind of the classic deal of a character that went through, Order 66, I would imagine, and just kind of dealt with that whole situation where it's like, hey, I was defeated by a Sith, and then I'm super mad, but I'm not mad enough that I'm a bad guy. I'm still a Jedi. I'm just like an emotional Jedi, which you totally aren't supposed to be, which is also dumb, but that's a different conversation. But I like the character. Of course, it starts off with them at like a really cool bar, or like, I guess it's more like a gambling den that's set on 2 AT-ATs. I thought that was super cool. And then you have the bodyguard is the Sith that the Ronin is looking for, and then she instantly loses an arm. I assume her leg was already gone, because they revealed that towards the end of the episode, and I was like, even when I rewatched, I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's just in there, and she just pops up with like just a random saber leg. So I was like, I guess she always had a fake leg, but you just couldn't really tell. So I think that's how it went, unless I missed it both times, and that was just how it went. But I was like, oh, that's interesting. When it gets to the end, I'm like, I don't think they made like a point to show that off really, but thought it was cool. Of course, love the visuals, just like I did from the last one, where the only real color you get are like lightsabers and blaster bolts, and that's always, that's super sick. So I thought that was pretty cool. One thing I definitely put was the Ewoks in this. I just straight up put Ewok noises from Return. Those are straight up the actual, they were just like, we're just gonna do this. They might as well just put like the whole song in there. They might as well have just done like all of it, just like yup nup and everything, because like I was like, this is literally just the Return of the Jedi noise, which I didn't hate. I'm like, I'm always gonna appreciate that, but I thought that was pretty funny. Something else I put down, they had a weird thing where for some odd reason they wouldn't do subtitles for some of the stuff that was actually said in another language. They would like do it, I think they would do like Japanese subtitles, but they wouldn't automatically make English subtitles. So you had to turn the subtitles on to know what the character said, because it would be a bunch of Japanese subtitles, and it's like that doesn't pop up for you in English, of course, unless you put the English subtitles on. So I mentioned that they had a couple of those moments, like at the very end, the guy, I always forget the race, so of course I'm going to do the classic Greedo's race, but he was like, he's the Jedi that they killed. He was like, this guy's worth more than your friend over there. And that's what he said. And then there's like another portion where the little dude said like something at random. I was like, okay, that's interesting. I thought it was like just a really weird thing that they wouldn't just make it automatic where the subtitles, if you're watching in English, then they show up in English or something like that. But it's just a random weird thing that happened. So I made note of that for sure. Oh, I thought the woman that died. Thought woman died. And then that old rat. Oh, I think the old rat was something else for the Japanese thing. I don't know. I guess I just thought the woman died. I guess I forgot she came back, but I thought she got her arm chopped off, and then I thought she was done for. But that was not the case. And then also the Ronin himself, at this point in his life, even though he was of course formerly a Sith, he represents more balance than the Jedi actually does, which I thought was an interesting mechanic for such a short story. But I thought that was cool. That would be something that I would like to see, of course, with them doing a sequel to the Ronin. I don't think this one's going to have a series. I know we'll talk about that when we get to the 9th Jedi second episode, we'll call it. So we'll see how that ends up turning out. But I like what they do with the Ronin. I think they could form something from it if they wanted to, even if it was like a long story. I think there's stuff that they could easily do with that, but I can understand why it would be like in short form. Admittedly, I will say, if we're doing comparisons, because of course this would be the second time it showed up, I will say that I think I enjoyed the first one a little bit more. It's one of those weird things where they put more personality into it, but it was super silly. Like it was sillier than I would expect, even though it has some very serious moments. There are definitely some sillier things there personality wise. And it was like, I feel like if I watch, if this was like an episode like later, if it was like an actual series, you have like the first episode where he was a lot more serious, and then this one where they have like the little duel at the very end where they're kind of just playing around. I was like, if there was like something in between that where I felt I actually knew this character, it would feel like more progression. But at the same time, it was just one of those episodes where he just ends up teaming up with the people that he was fighting in the beginning. So in a sense, for a character we don't know, it does make sense. It just felt like one of those weird things like, oh, he's not as stoic. And also just in general, like I said, the stuff around him was way sillier than just like his personality. It was definitely the other characters around him being way sillier compared to the first episode, which was like super serious, where they're like, oh my God, we're like the whole town's blowing up. It was way more serious in the first one, but I didn't hate it or anything like that. But definitely something I noticed, like the personality they put in with a lot of the side characters compared to the Ronin himself. But that was episode 1. And then we have episode 2, Song of Wings. I thought this was a good episode as well. I think most of this season was actually really good. If there's one thing that I can say, aside from, like I said, the last 2 episodes I didn't really enjoy nearly as much, if there's one thing I missed from this volume compared to specifically volume 2, is the fact that they didn't do multiple or like international animation studios. They were just like, I mean, technically it would be international because obviously Disney's US, but they went all Japanese studios again, like volume 1. And as much as I love that, it's like, that's cool. Like the animation styles are still different and they're still fun. It was really cool seeing that from volume 2, where there are so many different styles. They literally had like the claymation episode from the people that did Wallace and Gromit. So for me personally, that's like a huge deal. But I loved what they did in the last volume, and like seeing all the different animation styles. Even one of the companies literally basically did it and it looked like a Clone Wars episode. And I was like, this is super cool. And I wish we got more of that in this volume, because it did kind of go back to, well, for one, we got literally 3 episodes based on companies that literally did episodes previously. So like 3 of the episodes were already 100% like we've seen them do literally this exact same thing. And then most of the other episodes were like, well, yeah, they're probably companies from the first volume, even if they weren't 100%. Once again, as an anime person, it's like, okay, not as drastic of a difference considering I've seen different types of anime, throughout the years. So for me, it was like, okay, it's not that it makes it bad or anything like that. It's just that I do wish that we got a little bit more. I will say the finale is probably the craziest one visually, and then the one right before that has like sort of like that CG 2D sort of effect going. So I think those were the 2 most different out of all of the episodes we got. Everything else was like kind of straight up anime. So that would be like my number 1 thing, where I'm like, I hope if we do end up getting a volume 4, which I assume we will, akin to like the Tales of series that they've done, where it's like, yeah, they work. You just kind of throw out a couple cool episodes and a bunch of short stories, and then it's like, yeah, we just get to enjoy that. So I'm hoping in the next volume they go back to being like, hey, we're gonna kind of spread the gambit a little bit and be like, hey, here's a French studio, here's an Indonesian studio, like anyone that can do like some cool animation, just let them do it and make a fun story. So I'd like to see that going forward in the series. But like I said, it doesn't take away from this volume. Like if the episodes are good, then the episodes are good. It's just from an animation perspective, it's like, man, I like seeing all the extreme variations. No offense to like anime companies as if they all look the same, but there is a difference between like an anime studio in Japan versus an anime studio from somewhere else. So you can notice the difference, but still enjoyed what we got in the volume, but definitely wanted to reference that before I ended up forgetting. But back to episode number 2, Song of Wings. Definitely an interesting episode where they land on this planet, and making sure I go through like these little notes here. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, I wrote a lot of notes, but I basically like wrote out everything that happened in this one. That's fun. Flip over here. But it was a fun episode. I think what they did with the little, I'm gonna call it a porg, even though I know that's not what it is. I like that character because it was just funny that that was kind of the route that they took for like the character that has the force. It also looked a lot like that very early Digimon that has like the long ears. That's like the first thing I thought of when they did that. But I like what they did with the episode. The animation for that was also in like that CG/2D realm. I thought that was pretty cool. I like the fact that you have this character. Once again, this is one of those episodes where it's like an introductory thing, but you could see it going beyond that, where it's like, okay, I could see this like kind of having like a couple short stories within the universe. And I like what they did with it. Of course, the ending battle where they have like this insane moment where the droid transforms into like a flying suit of armor. It's like, all right, that's kind of crazy, but in like the coolest, just most ridiculous way. And she's flying around and stuff. And then of course the little deal, he does the force and helps them get like their final thing. And they do a very classic, like shoot it right into the exhaust port, blows up everything, saves the planet, and all that stuff is good. And it's like, oh, okay, that's cool. And then, they kind of move on from there. But I like the episode. It was very simple. You have a princess that doesn't want to be called princess. They lost, like most people did. The Empire comes in, wipes a bunch of people out. lots of problems there. But time has moved on, and she's like, hey, I'm not a princess, I'm just kind of doing what I can to help people out. Turns out that the Empire didn't even know that they were there. They were just doing some mining, so of course they stopped that. And that comes from, like I said, her having like a crazy transforming flying droid costume versus an AT-AT that has a transforming like just like whole abdomen that just pops out with a bunch of new rockets and stuff. And I was like, insanely ridiculous, but I love it. I enjoyed it, and it was like, all right, it's fun to see. And like I said, the armor flying thing, not something that I think we'll ever see in anything that's not animated, unless you are straight up in like a Mandalorian costume or just have a basic jetpack. You're not going to see a character just in like a transforming droid flight suit. So definitely something that helps when it comes to these like little short stories, and they can do kind of sillier things and like alternate versions of what we've seen from Star Wars. So I did enjoy that. I thought it was a decent episode, fairly simple, but I was like, I can enjoy this. I definitely enjoyed it. And they had a decent little bit with the music where that was like kind of important to the character. And I was like, I can appreciate that as well. But on to episode 3, which of course is the second sequel of this volume, and that is The Ninth Jedi, Child of Hope. Now this episode was definitely interesting. I liked the first episode more, but it was also like, it was literally like a first episode, which is why this is the one that's getting a series. Haven't seen anything on that lately. Because they were talking about that when this volume was popping up, and it was like, hey, that's clearly going to be the one that gets a series. They made that official by the time this volume had come out, and it even ends with like a to be continued officially for this one, which is great. But some time has passed, and so we have the characters kind of just in a space battle. Our main character, boom, she gets shot off into space, and then she gets found by this little droid. And I like the episode. I do have to reference, super random. The droid looks like his outfit looks like he's wearing a jersey. Like if you look at I can't think Jay and Silent Bob, I cannot think of his real name right now for some insane reason. I'm like, he looks like him when he's in like his orange and blue jumpsuit, except it's like slightly alternate colors. But I was like, the droid's design looks like he's in a jersey. Like he has like almost like long sleeves and stuff. And I was like, he looks like he's dressed in a jersey. Just wanted to randomly point that out because that was something that popped into my head. Teto, that's the guy's name. And Kara is the main character. I definitely had to write that down because I do not remember a character. But Teto, on an insanely cool ship, looking, not looking for his boss, but looking for a way to save his master. And then they have what I assume is just like a hologram within the ship where it looks like an completely alternate world, which also comes up at some point. I think I wrote it down, but that happens in another episode too, where they're like in a ship and then they do something, and like the whole thing around it makes it look like it's an entirely different world. And it's like, that would actually be super cool. It's the other episode that is a sequel episode, so we'll get to that. But I was like, that would actually be super cool if we got to see more of that in the actual films. Like they'll have simple stuff. I think in The Last Jedi, they kind of had that in Snoke's room, and then they destroyed something, and then it like all the shutters or whatever came down, and then you just saw space. And I think that's like the only time they've done that in live action. But I'm like, that's actually a cool concept where it literally looked like she walked into like a fantasy world and they're on this insanely long bridge. Just the design of this ship, super cool. But I was like, this is incredibly impractical, but it's Star Wars, giant ships and stuff. Like not everything's gonna have a practical use. It just needs to look sweet, and it definitely did. But I'm like, that's a really long path in like this weird digital dome just to be walking across water for what looked like a straight 2-mile bridge just across the water just to go to another section where his master was. So I was like, that's odd to me. So I thought it was fun. Just, obviously trying to find realism in like fictional things is funny sometimes. So that was just on my mind. I was like, this is such a long walk to go like this one random portion. And that's where the back to tank is. Like, if anything, that's impractical to save lives. Like, why would it be so far away? Like, that should really be like right there. Like, if something goes crazy, don't have it like all the way off in one section. Like, you need some medical bays or something. But thought it was funny. Just wanted to randomly, like I said, adding realism to something that doesn't really need it, but it makes it funny sometimes. So I thought it was funny, even though I thought it was extremely cool. Like, I love the design of that, and I thought it was a very interesting thing as well. But I liked the episode as a whole, and I was shocked. I remember the first time I saw it, I was super shocked because I was like, oh, they're gonna get like a new droid buddy, and then he sacrifices himself at the end. They have like a cool fight where Kara is going up against the two guys that come after them, and she starts off, she's doing okay a little bit, and then she's about to get knocked out. Teto actually ends up helping her out, and then of course they do like their grand escape, and he has to give up some of his energy to do like the self-destruct sequence, because it's like, yeah, I can get you on the ship and use my bit of energy to help you there, and then after that I have to use like my last little bit to kind of make it back to my master. And the whole episode was just like, oh, they went to his master's dead. It's like, oh, that sucks. And then they go to the end of the episode, it's like, all right, he took some wounds, but he's a droid. He's like, no big deal, I barely feel it. And then it gets to the end, and despite the funny moment where she's like looking at the portal, he just basically hits her on the back and then just like knocks her into the thing. After that, it was like, oh, oh, he's dead, and it's super sad. And she escapes and everything's fine, and they end up rescuing her. And then she just like breaks down in tears. You know, she has like her actual droid. I'm like, this is a sad episode. Like, you definitely, like, the whole time you're like, oh, this is like the new droid buddy that they're gonna have. And he, you know, she kind of helps him out, and then he realizes like, hey, you're gonna, you know, like, my master always believed in the Jedi and stuff like that, and I believe in you as well. And then it's like, oh, he died. Oh, that's sad. That's effed up. I thought it was gonna be like just a nice, you know, they recruit the new guy and they go through this moment, but it's like, nope, no, his master's dead, and now he's dead too. And I was like, dang, that's actually kind of like, it's kind of a sad ending, but it was good. I like that. And of course, I would love to see what they do with this show. And obviously, you know, she's still looking for her dad after he was kidnapped, but I like what they did with it. I thought the action was good during like the little combat sequence they actually had. But all in all, I thought it was a fun episode. And like I said, more than anything, I was surprised. It was definitely that classic episode of the character kind of going through and trying to understand who she is and like her place, you know, within the Force as a Jedi, or whatever a Jedi may or may not really be during this era, which seemingly is like way past, like, even probably, you know, because I think the first volume came out before the sequels. I can't even remember, honestly. But even if it didn't, this seems like it's way, way beyond even what the sequels have done, like thousands of years in the future, seemingly based on the first episode. But I like the concept of it, and I would love to see how this kind of goes forward as like an actual series. So we'll see what ends up happening, because like I said, they officially ended like, hey, this is going to be a series. It got a straight up to be continued, and now we just wait. So we wait and see how that turns out. Like, are we going to get like specials? Are they going to make it like a consistent series? If it's Disney Plus, you know, odds are it'll be, you know, 1 week at a time, so we might get a nice chunk of episodes. But I like what they did with that one. I thought it was pretty cool, and I would love to see, like I said, an actual continuation of the series. So we'll see. Admittedly, we'll see what they do with it, but I don't have too many problems with it. I think we should be good. Obviously, I'm flipping my thing around trying to get to the right episode. But after that, we have Bounty Hunters, and I put next to this one, this could be a series. I think the first time I saw it, I don't know if I felt that way, but after watching it this time, I was like, this could easily be a series. I actually like the concept of it. You have the split personality for the droid, which I thought was pretty cool. The main character, she ends up being adopted. You know, it starts off where it's like, oh, she basically hates Jedi. You know, that's how they kind of tease it. And then, you know, by the end of it, you realize the Jedi actually freed her, but freeing her is what cost her her life, because it's like, hey, she killed all of the, you know, basically the people that like kidnapped her and stuff. I was like, she killed all of them, not me. And then she kind of gave me a gun and told me to, you know, piss off and be free. And it's like, that's not my fault. So she kind of has to find this Jedi to kind of gain her own freedom and be like, hey, you freed me, but also you screwed me over, because everyone kind of thinks it's my fault. And I'm like, that's actually a really good story. Like, I like that concept of a character being a bounty hunter, trying to do what she can to find a Jedi. And, you know, she, of course, seems like a good character, obviously, with the episode where it's like, okay, they're like enslaving the kids and stuff. And obviously she was as well. They show that she had like pretty much the exact same type of necklace. So she's a good character and a good person. But I like the idea of that. Like, well, what do you do? Do you just end up teaming up with the Jedi later on, and then you still have to fight seemingly like this giant conglomerate that is coming to across space and time to try to kill you because they think you took everybody out in the house? So I like that idea, and just that alone, I was like, this seems like it could be a series. I don't think it will be, but I think it could. I think that one for sure has potential, and I like the episode. You know, her dealing with the guy, and, you know, he's like just this rich dude, and he says all these cool things where it's like, oh, you know, it monitors health and all that stuff. It's like, oh, that's interesting. And I love the way that they confront it like super early on, because even when I first saw the episode, I was like, okay, chains on the something around the neck. It's like, you gotta wonder. And he instantly confronts it like, I know how it looks, but it actually monitors health and all that stuff. We want everybody to be good. And it's like, oh, okay. Not that you know, instantly gained any trust for him, but it was interesting. And then of course they go through the process. The droid leaves her for a hot minute because he was super pissed off and was like, hey, you know, like, I want all my, you know, I want to be fixed of, like, you know, this crazy split personality. Of course he finds out the truth, and so naturally he comes back later. But before all that happens, they go deal with the main guy, and he's like, oh, you want to come at me? I'm gonna show you how much money I got. And he dropped down in a giant golden droideka, which is the most insane thing ever, but it looks super cool. And I was like, okay, gold, like that if anything says money in Star Wars, it's a gold droideka, a giant gold droideka that he pilots himself. So that was super crazy, but I absolutely loved it. So it was nice. I like the action, and of course, you know, they team up and stuff. The droid was able to take some very decent hits. Like, for a droid that was built as a medical droid, I don't know the elements of like the split personality having like the assassin protocol, but I'm like, clearly as a medical droid, he was built like insanely well, because even a medical droid shouldn't be able to take hits from a droideka, and he was taking like some major hits. And I was like, he's like, did they add the components with the personality? Because that's a tough droid just to be like a generic like medical droid, or just, I don't know, I said medical, but like protocol droid is what I meant to say. I don't know, say medical the whole time, but I just thought that was interesting. I was like, okay, because even just the personality aside, I was like, he's kind of built tough, built for tough, if you understand that reference, which I think most people will. But I liked the episode. I thought it was pretty cool. They did a classic EMP because that's kind of the only way to take down a droid in general, unless you do like the classic Clone Wars roll and throw a thermal detonator like in it. You do it nice and slow. You can get right past those shields. But I thought that was cool. And, like I said, it ends with her being like, I got to find this Jedi to kind of, in a sense, clear my name and figure out kind of what my next steps are. So that made me think like, that would be cool. They made friends with all the kids and everything. So it's like they have like a little home to come back to if they want to, or like a hub area to rest. But seemed like it could have been a series. So I definitely enjoyed it like my second time around. I think I enjoyed it a lot more than I did even the first time I saw it. And then after that, we have Yuko's Treasure. I put right next to it. Very cute. It's super cute. It was definitely a cute episode. It was on Tatooine. Definitely a good episode. I remember the first time I saw it, I thought for sure they were going to be brother and sister because he had like the thing. And I guess he just found that at some point randomly in time. But I thought 100% the first time I saw it, I was like, oh, they're, Star Wars. They were split at birth. Like it was all like right there, honestly. And then it just turned out like he just kind of found that at some point randomly. And that was really about it. And there was no like connection to the other characters, which ended up being the girl's mom and dad. Zola, I think is her name. Or I put Zola, but I think that's probably somebody else's name. Either way, the little girl. So I like the episode, like I said, very cute, very hilarious. I remember loving this episode the first time I saw it because it was like, it started off where it was like, oh, you got like the cute characters. You got the bear droid who has a microwave in the stomach, very convenient. And then it got to like full on Team Rocket with the Darth Vader guy. Like him in the cape was just like he was always like flourishing the cape. I love them. I thought they were super funny. They had like the Twilight girl who was like very much Harley Quinn-esque in my opinion. Then they had like the nerdy dude who was on the team as well. And it was like, I love these characters. Like they're super funny. I don't know if this could end up being a series or anything, but they were hilarious. Like for this short, absolutely love them. So I got like Villain with the Henchman, Cape Flourish, He's My Family thing, all the emotional beats, definitely good. I love the line, and I wrote this down. When she says like, he's my family, like the droid, and the boy was talking to her, like, he's just a droid. She's like, he's my family. And then she walks past him and his line was like, I don't know what that means. Okay. I love that. Like the first time I saw that, I was like, that is a great line. Like he's like, sorry, like I don't get it. And I was like, that's dark, but also like realistic of just his life. And I was like, that's a great line. So I absolutely love that line. So I thought that was cool. Billy actually becomes Vader at the end. Billy is the name of the droid. Him getting the actual like mind control helmet that makes him look more like Darth Vader, but the other guy was already kind of Vader-ish, or Vader-ish-esque, however I'm trying to say it. Vader-like, there we go, that's a real thing. But thought it was funny, like the whole way through. I enjoyed all of them as well. They literally fall like Team Rocket. And I just thought that was great. Then they have like the emotional beat with the holograms like inside the house. Very good episode, very cute, like I said, very funny. I loved all the villains and all the ridiculous silly stuff that they did with that. Phenomenal, to say the least. I actually, that's definitely one of my favorites. That's one of my favorites for sure. And if I'm doing this correctly, right, yeah, I am. Then we have legit one of the greatest things that has ever happened in my nerdy little life. And I made a video about this like way back when I actually watched it, and it's just titled like My Life is Complete. The Lost Ones. This is another sequel episode. It was the Jedi girl who didn't really have much of a name. I think they literally just call her F. I put the letter F. I think that's just what they call her, and that's about it. It was really cool. The intro, I just wrote it, capital letters right there. Back to the Future. That's my handwriting for you. That was an amazing reference. Them doing a Back to the Future reference, which was also, in fact, a Star Wars reference within Back to the Future. That was one of the greatest things ever. Like, I was like, this is, and I was high the first time I saw it. I was probably high the second time I saw it. Either way, when I saw it, I was happy. I was extremely happy because that was just a beautiful reference. I absolutely loved it. And then even the story after that was super cool. Carbonite fog, that should be in everything. That was just like, okay, like they blew up a facility and like messed things up on the whole planet, and carbonite fog rolls through and just freezes everything in place. Genius. That's just like a genius, simple concept, but not everybody has the resources to just like get rid of carbonite. Like that was such a cool thing. I was like, this is awesome. Like that, I thought was such a cool feature. So I thought that was amazing. We found out that F at some point lost her leg because they don't reference that in the first episode. So I assume it was in between the episodes that she lost her leg, or she always had a robot leg. Like it's hard to tell because it's not a real series. So it's like, did she always have that in the first episode? Because they don't do anything to show it outside of like, she had like the little jet boot thing in the first in the first volume in the episode, like that's how she kind of won. She did like a super speed like slash, but it was like, okay, those were like jet boots. That was like her heels like transformed a little bit. So I'm like, was that like her whole leg the whole time, or did she end up losing a leg at some point? So I don't really know, but I would love to know your theories on that, or if I just missed something that clearly explained it in the first episode. But I was like, I just assumed that was just her boots specifically had like propulsion in them, and that's what helped her, and not that it was like her entire leg. But thought that was interesting. So that was cool. They had the Star Destroyer, which was cool. I put it in there. Another crazy hollow world where the guy was just like in a beautiful dome and he had like roses all over the place and stuff like that. Shad Ra is the name of the character. Some character, because Zero is the name of her master. I guess that was his old name. Shad Ra was like his old name, and then he changed his name to Zero, which is a cooler name, admittedly. It's pretty sweet. But I love how they did that. And then she lost her arm in that fight, which was super crazy, but she tagged him with the carbonite. So she got her arm chopped off, and then he get frozen in carbonite. And it was like, that's a crazy way to end that battle as well. Like she lost her arm in the battle and then freezes him to death. And obviously they blow up the whole Star Destroyer. So I think he's gone, but definitely cool. And I think it's really interesting. Like I said, it could be a series just because her character is really cool. And the first one was very much more standalone compared to this, where it's like, okay, there's a lot of elements. They give her, backstory. They show her former master turned into a Sith. Everything they do with like the Carbonite planet and stuff like that. Clearly there's a lot here that sets up way beyond the first time she was shown, where it was like she's just on like a planet during like a festival or something like that. And that was really it. So definitely enjoyed this episode. And I had one thing that I wrote right here. She lost her arm, freezes her master in Carbonite, and then the other dude that was on the Star Destroyer with her, he was like, hey, I'm going to help you out. And he was on a ship outside. I wrote it right here. How did they get through the glass? Like the whole ship was blowing up and he was just in like a random portion that was outside of like what was the Hollow Dome before it like broke. And I'm like, how did he help her get out though? Because he was outside and she was inside, and not inside of like the cargo area where the ships are. She was in like a totally different spot as this whole place was exploding. And he's like, I'm gonna get you out of there. And I'm like, how did that happen? Jump cut is how it happened. But realistically, I was like, that doesn't make a lot of sense, but move past that one. Next episode, I also put series next to this. The Smuggler. Prince Arlo, I put there. I put Gozen, shipmate. Left Arlo has moves, made his Jedi. Okay, now I remember, because I'm like, I don't know. I just got names and crap. I don't know what any of that means. But now I get it. Prince Arlo and the British Jedi maid that he has, which was super cool with the revelation that her lightsaber was like in her sleeve, or I should say in her arm. I thought that was pretty cool. I like what they did with that. He wants to be a hero to the people, so he even outs himself when like the random kid was about to get, or was being harassed by stormtroopers. So I thought that was cool. I love like when they have to get back to the ship initially, her crewmate was there and was like, hey, there's a bunch of stormtroopers, like we'll figure it out. And he was like, see ya, and he just left. And I was like, that's kind of funny. Like he was just like, nah, I'm not, I don't want this. I'm just gonna take off. And that's it. We don't ever see him, and he's just gone. It's like, well, he left because he didn't want to die. And I was like, that's fair. But it was very funny. Like he just was like, I'm gonna leave. I'm just gonna go. So I thought that was cool. Then they do like the hyper jump before they end up getting destroyed, which I thought was pretty neat. And in general, I thought it was a fun episode. Like I also like the design of the character. The main character, like she had a very like, she had clearly had like the Han Solo look, and then they just did like a little bit of anime like pink hair on her, and I was like, okay, that's cool. Like she looked fine. I thought it was cool. In general, I like the episode, and I'm putting this thing backwards like in such weird ways that I'm super lost with where I'm trying to go. But it was a good episode. And yeah, Lost Arm, Order 66, and then they went to Yavin. That's what I put at the very end. They went to Yavin, so I thought that was cool. As in, classic little reference. Could easily be a series. They just start fighting, and that clearly, based on them actually going to Yavin, shows like a very particular point in time where that one could take place. But once again, probably won't be a series. I think it has some potential. And then we have the Bird of Paradise. I remember the first time I saw this is the episode before last. I did not like this episode. I thought it was like kind of boring. I was a lot better on it this time, but I hated the English dialogue. The first time I watched it, I was just like, I just didn't like her acting. I just, the way it sounded seemed over the top, and then in other parts it didn't seem dramatic enough. Like it just felt fake the entire way through. And I remember I watched like most of that episode. I think I actually ended up watching in Japanese, like it just felt better. And I absolutely hated it the first time, where I was like, I just couldn't, in English at the very least, I was like, I just couldn't watch it. But felt a lot better about it this time. Once again, I'll admit, because I just don't care that much for the episode as a whole, even when I rewatched it, I was like, oh, okay. And I was walking around as the episode was playing. I was like, all right. I was kind of like checking in on it, but I still didn't really like the episode. Like, it was, once again, a classic thing. You know, she was too arrogant. She ended up finding like the crazy Sith woman and got both her eyes cut, falls off a cliff. She ends up living. And then she has to figure out her place in the force and go kind of the Kanan route of being like, well, I'm blind, but I can see all things through the force. And she had to do that by, you know, struggling and going through, you know, freaking out about dying over and over again, being hungry, drinking some sort of gross water that she shouldn't have drank. And then just her process of like, you know, her mental struggle and the dark side within her own arrogance and everything like that. It was a classic, you know, simple story, but I just didn't find it very entertaining. I just wasn't the biggest fan of it. Like I said, I think feeling like I had to switch the very first time, because I remember, like I said, how I felt when I first watched it. That definitely impacts where it's like, dang, I can't even just watch it and then like enjoy it. Like I had to watch it and read it, which is different, but still enjoyed the episode enough. But it was still just one of those things where I was like, it's okay. Like it was kind of a normal episode. I will say, because I started in English, I do think that kind of pulled me out of it, because I didn't enjoy it. And I literally went back and forth. The first time I did, I was literally like, I pretty much watched the whole episode 2 times, because I would just go through full sequences and then I'd be like, I just want to see what it sounds like in English just to see how I feel about it. And I'd be like, yeah, I just don't think that sounded really great. So that's how I felt like the first time I watched it. I was literally like kind of doing both. But it was an okay premise. You know, like I said, very simple. She had her arrogance, and then she goes through, and by the end, she is, in a sense, one with the force. Like, she's much better and understands like her brash arrogance and the very clear negative effects on her vision at that point. But now she can see through the force. She's able to fight herself, you know, within her mind, and kind of defeat that side of her, but say like, hey, I can defeat you, but you'll always be a part of me, just like I'm always a part of you. Like, every part of what you are, good and bad, has to live within you. That's a part of the balance. So classic, you know, Jedi story of kind of effing up a little bit and then figuring out a better place within the force and how it surrounds us, and it's in all living things and all that jazz. But it was decent. But yeah, I definitely had some issues with it, and it was just like, it just wasn't like the greatest thing on earth to, you know, for me personally. But like I said, classic story, arrogant Padawan, decent little action sequence in the beginning, and then, you know, she was lucky to live. She got cut on both her eyes. She like vertical on both, straight up blind, and fell off a cliff. The fact that she lived at all is probably a miracle within the force. But simple story, learned a lesson. And it doesn't actually end with a real, like, the fight that they have is all like mental, is like her fighting herself. But it was kind of surprising that at no point does she go through the process and then they show like the ending of her like finding her master again and then teaming up, and then, you know, they like actually do all of that. But it was cool. It was cool, but not cool enough for me to be like, oh man, it was a great episode. It was, especially, like I said, kind of a first run through, kind of being taken out of it as far as like the English voice acting. But that was the episode, The Bird of Paradise. And I didn't even bother writing down the name of the last episode. I didn't watch it. I didn't even bother writing it down. But I can tell you how I felt. First time I watched it, it was a long one. There's no dialogue. I remember everything about the episode because there's not much to it. It's just weird visuals, and it looks insane, and it's just noises and music, and I'm like, I don't understand this at all. I figured it out by the end that it's literally like just a dude dying on the Death Star. That's what it was. And it's like him just experiencing death. I'm pretty sure it's like the whole point of it. I don't think it's different people. I think it is the perspective of like one person and just seeing everyone dying as like the Death Star is like blowing up. Even though it was like this in the movies, in the actual episode, it was a bit slower. So it's like people are dying here and things are crazy and there's fire and all this stuff. And it was like, this is a weird episode. It's weird visuals. There's no dialogue. There's sound effects and music. And it's like, okay. The first time I watched it, I legit remember thinking when I finished it, just being like, I kind of felt like it was a waste of my time. I was just like, which is why I didn't bother rewatching it. There was nothing to really comment on. I didn't like the episode the first time I saw it. It was so crazy just watching it. And because and the funny thing is, I figured out the story that it was like a dude dying on the Death Star. But because the visuals were so insane and it seemed like it kind of did jump from different perspectives and stuff, which I don't, like I said, I don't think it did. I think it was meant to be one person. But because it looks so weird the whole way through, and it's just like weird visuals as if it's the person seeing what's really happening on the Death Star versus what they're envisioning as they die, it was just weird. And I was like, okay, I'm not a fan. So that's how I felt. Like, it's super simple. It was crazy. It was a dude dying on the Death Star. That was the whole episode, but it was done in the weirdest way possible. It was super weird. But that was the episode, and of course the finale. I wouldn't say it was the greatest finale, but it also makes sense why it's the finale, because that'll definitely make you pause and be like, I don't know if I want to watch anything after this, because I'm like, that just like, ugh. It was a crappy ending too. For me personally, like I said, I was just like, not my favorite ending, especially 2 episodes in a row, because I definitely was like binging the show when I first watched it. 2 episodes in a row, I was like, you kind of like barely got me with the last one. And then the actual finale, I'm just like, no. But that's how I felt about the volume as a whole. Still really good. It was literally just the last 2 episodes. I'd say I actually genuinely enjoyed more consistently. I think it had higher highs. But unfortunately, I think it had, for me personally at least, has like the lowest lows when it comes to those last 2 episodes. I think no other volume has that where I'm like, oh, I'm like super down on this episode, or I think this one like really blows compared to everything else. It was just this volume in particular. There are episodes I can think of from the other volumes where it might be like one episode where I'm like, I'm kind of like so-so on it. But there was never one where I was like even taken out by like just English dialogue or anything like that, or just being like, this is just weird and like not in an entertaining, fun way to me. So never had that. I would say, like I said, the lowest lows, but consistently up until those final 2 episodes, I really enjoyed what we got throughout like this entire volume. So it's still a great volume, and that's the point of, short stories. You can always pick and choose which ones you want to watch. You get a nice 20-minute episode. It's like, I don't have to watch any of this other stuff. I'm just going to be right in this story that I enjoy. So that's great. If you ever want to rewatch them, you easily can. Like I said, for most of these, it was only my second time watching any of these episodes, and I was really enjoying them, probably more so this time than I did, the first time for some episodes. And it was just those last 2. Like I said, I didn't even bother giving the last episode a chance. I just straight up didn't like it when I first watched it. I was like, I'm not even going to waste the time. And then, the Bird of Paradise episode, I was kinder on it, but I still wasn't like having the best time with the episode. But those are my thoughts, my super duper, super late thoughts on Star Wars Visions Volume 3. But of course, I would love to know your thoughts on this volume and your favorite episodes, your least favorite episodes. Would you like to see it continue? Are there any episodes in this volume? Like I said, I have a couple where I was like, this could be a series. This could be a start to a series. Or obviously we have 3 sequels. At this point, it almost feels like they should just make them, full-on stories, especially if you're going to go with F and her story with like the crew and them dealing with the carbonite stuff, and then naturally the Ninth Jedi literally is going to be a series. But I would love to know your thoughts on it. So which episodes should end up getting sequels? Which ones do you think really could work if they continued the stories and kind of expanded them? Which ones don't work even as the stories that they are? I would love to know your thoughts on all of that. So please put your comments down in the comment section below. And of course, thanks for watching.